and neaten everything up for them so that
Mhm.
they don't have to work at life, because life is, it's a job, it's work. We
Yeah,
have to
and
work at it.
actively carve, their own path, which I think can lead to so much fulfillment. If
Oh
you're
yeah.
always kind of like putting responsibility for your decisions on like, oh, this is what so and so wanted me to do, or this is what I should do. I don't think that you ever really feel the true joy from like making a decision autonomously and then deciding it was right or wrong for you and like moving
Hmm.
away from it or leaning into it. And I think that's such beautiful advice. So, like, you've actually given a really great process for
Oh,
parenting in the
I'm glad.
pandemic, even though your children are a little bit older, but it's applicable for everyone because I think even in relationships with your partner when your baby's an infant, maybe
Hmm.
like having these open conversations with them is not applicable at the time. However, this is like a totally new life space that you're navigating. So still that same principle of one, okay, we're embracing this together. Two, we're going to be incredibly honest about our feelings in a non-judgmental way because we've decided to embrace. Three is like that putting the honesty into transparency and actively talking about it. And then you said something really good, and I don't know how to coin this in one phrase or step, but I think it's like the navigating portion where like
Yeah.
you're also setting some boundaries around, okay, we've communicated, um, not taking on responsibility, for other people's feelings necessarily. You're holding space for them to,
Holding space and being sensitive of that and having empathy for that. But those things don't necessarily have to translate to, here, let me fix everything for you. Because this
yeah.
whole pandemic is so symbolic of the curveballs that we all, I mean, it's an extreme curveball, but that we all have in life. And I think one of the other things that we didn't even touch on is that, and this is what we've done a lot of in our house, and we can do this because our girls are in their 20s.
Mhm.
We've talked a lot about like, this sucks, guys. Like, this
Yeah.
absolutely sucks. And it's okay to sit in that suckiness for a
Mhm.
while. It's okay to not know what's happening next week or next month. It feels icky and it's unsettling, but we're all in the same boat, so to speak. I mean, obviously, everybody has different circumstances. Some people have been alone the entire time. Some people are with people. Some
Mhm.
people have a job. Some people don't have a job. So there are a lot of variables. But the essence is we're all living through this thing together, and there are real aspects of it that suck. So
Yeah.
own that, and don't be afraid to sit in that, because that's part of this whole process too. And those are things to be equally as transparent about,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Not masking or
Yeah.
pretending that this is
Yep.
something that it's not. I think that's really a beautiful thing and that you've been writing to help people. I think so many times, not just in parenting, we as humans just like evolutionarily want to be a part of our social framework, right? And part of that
Mhm.
means we want to feel acceptable and we want to feel like we're doing things right, even though maybe
Yep.
there's statistically no right or wrong. But
Not anymore. Not
just
anymore. There isn't.
just by having like someone be brave enough to be vulnerable about these experiences and to open up the dialogue to have these conversations, I think that's really, it's just wonderful what you're doing because
Thank
nobody
you.
wants to feel alone and like this is, yeah, it's okay to feel icky, it's okay to sit in that. And so from the actively navigating step, what would you say, because I thought it was funny when you touched on unicorn parenting, right? So you're recognizing maybe things in yourself. You're like, oof, I'm not really handling this so well or the way that
Mhm.
I want it to be. From actively navigating when you recognize maybe I have some unicorn parent tendencies or lawnmower parent, how would you how would you provide insight for somebody that's at that point where they're acknowledging and they don't necessarily want to continue that way?
That's a really tough one. Um, we also have talked, not in this book, but my co-author Deb Gansenberg and I do quite a bit of speaking as well, and we've talked a lot about the different parenting styles, like permissive and authoritative and authoritarian, and we've identified them and shared them with parents, and it's difficult it's difficult to acknowledge when you are being that thing that you don't
Mhm.
want to be. It's
Yeah.
hard and it's scary because once you acknowledge that, then you're really kind of committing to yourself to have to change that. I think, I don't know if there's any pathway, like any one specific pathway to arrive in that place when you've been like, oh God, I'm this or I'm that, or I'm this kind of a parent. I think it's just honesty. I think it's just that's the place to start.
Yeah.
Um, just doing your best to acknowledge the behaviors in yourself, and don't be afraid of having conversations that may, whether it's with your partner or your spouse or your child even, or friends, where you kind of expose aspects of yourself. Don't be afraid of that, because you're doing the work. That's the beginning of the work toward changing the behaviors that you're seeing in yourself. It's scary. Like nobody wants to screw up, but
Right.
or feel like they've made mistakes. I have absolutely 1,000% made so many more mistakes than I haven't. Do you know what I mean? As a
Yeah.
parent, for sure. But it's in owning those and really dialing directly into them that allows you to kind of deconstruct them and understand, like, okay, well, I did that and that felt bad, or that was dumb or ineffective or whatever it was.
Mhm.
Now I want to be able to move away from that in a way that I don't repeat that behavior. It all just boils back down to honesty,
Yeah.
and not being afraid to have the hard conversations with yourself or the people around you who may be pointing it out.
Yeah. And once you've come to the place where you're acknowledging, like, wow, maybe this behavior is not how I want to be, and it can be so painful, right? Because you
Hmm.
ideally innately want to do the very best thing for your children. So when you realize what you're doing is actually not that, and you can stop and you can say, like, okay, I'm being honest, and this is how I want to approach it, this is how I would like to change it. I think it
Hmm.
goes back to just the premise of your book, Raising Perfectly Imperfect Kids, which is mistakes are going to happen. Like, there's no possible way you can make every decision correctly,
No,
and so giving,
perfection is a myth. It's a myth.
yeah, and so giving yourself then the space and the grace to say, like, this is okay, it's not fatal, we are like beautifully neuroplastic, and that's the wonderful thing about having consciousness, is being able to acknowledge and recognize, like, oh, this is something I'm doing, it doesn't need to be a part of my identity anymore, and these are, and then
Hmm.
by being transparent with people around you that you trusted people that care about you, like, it can just be so liberating to realize that you can grow or change and not make exactly the same decisions that you've always made or that you were modeled and when you're a child from your
Hmm.
parents. So this was just so wonderful. I think it's like applicable to more than parenting, honestly, Lisa.
It
And
is, and I can't even tell you how many conversations, how many beautiful conversations have come from just the impetus of this book, which is that perfection is unattainable. It,
Mhm.
you know, it it all of what we talked about has every bit as much to do with work and life and relationships and career and self-development, all of it. I mean, it all kind of funnels back to the same place. And I mean, I talk about this a lot, the idea that I would almost rather have the mistake. I would rather have the screw up. I mean, wins feel great. If you're talking about wins and losses in life,
Mhm.
who doesn't love a win? It makes you feel great. You feel successful. You feel empowered. All those things. But
Mhm.
I think that the real nuggets are inside the mistakes and inside the dark or scary moments that you found a way to work through, that
Yeah.
you learned from, that you dug into, and they changed you.
Hmm.
You know, they changed the narrative for you. And that those changes, I think, typically come from, you know, the moments that are kind of messy and dirty and that don't feel great, because those are the ones that you remember, and
Yeah.
those are the ones that can kind of propel you to a different place. So those screw ups are, they're important, and you're right, this does apply to way more than just parenting. This was just, you know, this was my wheelhouse. So, you know, working for so long with kids and having my own, it just was where I landed, but it applies to everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is such a wonderful final like step to the process of parenting in the pandemic is being able to reframe
Mm-hmm.
essentially what you consider to be a mistake once it's acknowledged and like seeing it as an opportunity or like that's where you find the nugget,
Yep.
something really, really valuable that is the impetus for change or for leading you towards the kind of quality life that you want. And it takes those sort of decisions that result in something maybe that wasn't what you planned or how you wanted that outcome to go.
I feel like, honestly, some of the best situations that I've ever arrived in my life came from, you know, like a bad beginning. They came from
Mm-hmm.
a mistake in judgment, or, you know, you said something or did something, and it took you here when you wanted to go there.
Yeah.
And it's when you kind of stopped and understood it, and learned from it, if it wasn't ideal, that you realize, like, wow, okay, this brought me to a place because I was open, because I was willing to work on this, or to embrace this failure, for instance. It got me here, and I never would have gotten here without that happening.
Right.
I can retrace so many different experiences in my life to that moment where it was, you know, just all about kind of embracing the thing that didn't go right, for
Yeah.
where it could take me. And oftentimes you just end up in such a distinctly different and almost better place.
Yeah. And that is a beautiful perspective to cultivate, you know? I so appreciate you getting on and joining and providing these insights. And so just to kind of recap for anyone that popped in kind of late, we sort of went through from Lisa's experience as not only a mom herself, but a syndicated journalist and author of How to Raise Perfectly Imperfect Parents, just some insights that she's gleaned from parenting in the pandemic. One, we started with embracing the situation, and then two, being honest about it. You know, whatever, even if it is uncomfortable emotions or feelings or things that you need to share, and putting that actively into transparency with your community or your family or your children, or if you know your child's an infant, your partner, who you're with, your close support system. So then from transparency, it's actively navigating, right? And
Yeah. Oh,
with
there's
that,
it's active.
yeah,
For sure.
holding space and you know not jumping in to save, but giving people room for their own feelings without 100% taking it on you and making it your responsibility. And then from actively navigating, how do we summarize the last step? It was sort of like uh, reframing, right? Like,
Hmm.
okay, maybe a mistake happened, or maybe
Embracing
this,
that,
embracing
embracing
that.
that mistake. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, we got
Yeah.
a comment. So, I grew up in an environment where mistakes were not acknowledged, valuable, and not honored as a part of life. Having a family of my own, we realized the beauty of growth that comes from them. Oh, that was such,
That's
thank you for sharing
It's
that.
beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm so glad. See, this goes back to that comment, makes me immediately dive to the whole notion of choice. We all we can't control the world around us. We can't, clearly. I mean, and we can't control what the world is doing around us, but we can absolutely control our attitude and what we put out into the world, what how we receive what's happening. Um, and that's a perfect example of someone knowing innately that certain things didn't work for them, but they made that conscious choice to do the things in their own life when they had the ability to kind of make the rules, they made the choices that made sense for them, and they're
Yeah.
carrying on in a way that feels good to them. So I love that. That's a beautiful. I mean, I know it didn't start out great when she was younger. They were
Yeah.
younger, but it certainly sounds like, they're in a nice, healthy groove, which is beautiful.
Yeah, and learning like this is how I don't want to be. I was modeled
Yeah.
this
Well,
behavior and
that's
now
that's that's huge, actually. It's not just about learning what we do want and how we are happy, but it's what makes us unhappy and what we don't like and what doesn't jive with us.
Mhm.
That's just as important. They
Absolutely.
go hand in hand. You really can't have one without the other.
And being true to that too. Well,
That's so important. Can I add one thing that I just thought of,
yeah,
um,
absolutely.
as we wind things down? One thing that's so important, and in terms of this pandemic and how people are behaving, and the takeaways and how to navigate through it. One of the things that I've paid a lot of attention to in the last 5 months, 6 months, is how other people are judging themselves against what the people around them are doing.
Mm,
You've got all this incredible social media that's creating certain imagery that may not be so accurate about what people's lives are like, and how easy some people have it and how difficult others have it. I think the most important thing, because there's so much swirling around that people are paying attention to now in terms of how other people are doing the pandemic.
hmm.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Don't worry about what's going on in somebody else's Insta feed, or on their Facebook feed, or how other people are dealing with the dynamic within their family, or the rules they're making, or how they're keeping themselves safe or not. um, that's, I think, the quickest way to implode, if you're
Yeah.
paying so much more attention to what other people are doing and thinking that you should be doing the same. Don't do that. Do what feels right for you. Do what feels right for your family unit and your children and your partner, and
Hmm.
let the other stuff go. Just let it fall away.
That's such beautiful advice too. And I think being able to find resources that empower you to make those very autonomous and independent decisions is very important, whether it be, finding a good friend to talk to that's non-judgmental, helps you in this embracing process, step one,
Hmm.
or even a therapist or just someone to trust and to confide in. Because the reality, that was such a great point, is it's very easy to look around at external um, comparative situations, but you have this much of the information of all of the variables in that other
That's
person's
right.
life. And so if you're using their decision making as your prescription and your life playbook, nobody has your same variables. Nobody has
That's
your
right.
same environmental experiences that you grew up with, or even your same genetics or your families. And so, um, yeah, really honing in to this process and constantly reiterating, I think gives you the confidence in making these
Hmm.
decisions for yourself.
Yeah.
Going through this 8-step process we essentially delineated. Um, and so, before we have to hop off, Lisa, I've just really enjoyed this conversation. And
Oh, so have
where
I.
where can anyone who's listening find your books or find your articles that you're publishing?
Well, I mean, my columns are all over the place. I write a column for Healthline Parenthood called My
Okay.
Perfectly Imperfect Mom Life, and that's a monthly column that's exclusive on Healthline Parenthood. I also write for Grown and Flown. They are a really incredible, if you're talking about resources, incredible resource for parents to access who have children ages 15 to 25, and they're at Grown and Flown. I have a lot of work on their platform. You can find me at lisasugarman.com. You can find my books are all over the place. Anywhere that you can find books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, indie bookstores, all over the place. And of course, I'm I'm on Facebook at the Elisa Sugarman. I'm Instagram as Lisa_Sugarman, and the Elisa Sugarman on Twitter.
Awesome. Well, I'll be sure to, host the link to your site, also to your regular columns and our show notes, because we'll be transforming this into a podcast for
Oh, great.
those who couldn't actually join on this random Tuesday afternoon. And then I just want to also make mention to, like, if you are feeling unsupported, if you are feeling like, typically we provide, perinatal sort of like telehealth visits to help moms differentiate, is this something that I need to like go into the ER or the urgent care for, or is this something we can solve right here, like with our fingertips in a virtual visit? And so we have those services available on thenaturalnipple.com. Sometimes it's just really as simple as saying, like, is this normal? Is it not? And then having, advice from trusted healthcare providers that can really sit with you for a longer than a 15-minute session and give you that empathetic, holistic care that I think people really need. But
What a great resource.
Thank you. I appreciate you joining. I would love to stay in touch. And as soon as I've transformed it into the podcast, I'll make sure to share with you. Okay, Lisa?
Wonderful. And then I'll make sure to share it with everybody on all my platforms, because I think that what you're doing is beautiful and essential work. And it's so important to be able to give everyone access to these kinds of resources.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again so much for your time.
Thanks, Lauren.
I just hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll be in touch.
You too. I can't wait. Thanks again
Thanks.
for